Hi everyone, welcome to Travel Explore Celebrate Life with Veena World. This is Neil and as always joined by Sunila. Well, this is a slightly delayed episode. We are releasing it on a Monday instead of the regular Saturday because here in Mumbai, Maharashtra, we have had the Ganesh festival and as a result, we've been slightly delayed. But what has happened over the last month is that Sunila has traveled to the US, and of course she's traveled to the US, but while traveling to the US, she was also on the world's longest flight, I would say. Yes. That is from the Big Apple, New York, to Singapore, and then from Singapore into Mumbai. Well, Sunila, it's no longer the longest flight in the world. Now Qatar Airways has taken over and it's on another route. But today we're going to talk about the Big Apple, that is New York. And the last time I was in New York was fairly a long time ago. I think it's been 5 years. But you have been to New York now. I would say you've been to New York post the pandemic. Yes. So let's talk about New York today. Of course, you covered many other places, but today is going to be all about the New York getaway that you had with my mom and went to see my brother Raj. So what is a good place to start when we talk about New York? Because there's so much that we can really talk about. But listeners, I would also say that we are talking about New York from the angle of a traveler, of a tourist. Of course, if someone's listening to this episode from New York, you'll have so many suggestions. So you can write to us at neil@veenaworld.com and sunila@veenaworld.com. But Sunila, let's get going. Like, where should we start? What was one highlight that you would like to start off this episode of Travel Explore Celebrate Life with?
Hi, Neil. Um, there are so many things to do in New York and just so much. And whether you're a first time traveler, second time, I don't know, whether it's a 10th trip to New York, there's still always something new to do. And I think let's go the other way around, because usually we would speak about everything to do and then we would decide where to stay. But I think if you're going to New York, the number one question on anyone's mind is, where do I stay? And going post pandemic, also that was a question, that how are the cities? We were quite excited because we wanted to really go back and see how is life, is everything back to normal? And we had heard stories that things are back to normal. And yes, pretty much it did feel like everything was back to where it was. But I think let's start with this first point, that where should I stay if I go to New York? And this time we wanted to be like complete tourists in New York. So, like you said, we did go to the West Coast to meet your brother, and we were there with him because he's working there. And so that really felt like that was a part where we were living in the US. We had a car that was rented, we had our own little grocery and other things to do. So that part felt like, yes, we can live here. And then when we came to New York, we said, you know, let's really just enjoy life like a tourist and do everything that is. And I think coming back to the point of where to stay, I would say usually we always think that let's not stay in the city center, or let's not stay absolutely in the most crowded area, because you want your rooms to be a little bigger, you want some peace and quiet. But this time we were ready for action and we stayed at very close to the Times Square. So we were at the Western Times Square, and that's like hardly not even a 5-minute walk to Times Square. And I wanted to experience it because, usually we say it's too crowded, it's too noisy. Should I stay here? Should I not stay here? And some of the other places, like the last time when we were in New York, we stayed near Central Park. So again, that's one area where you can stay. Another point, which is not too far, and that this happens when you're going out to really explore the city, because New York is a place where you're not going to go to bed very early. You would want to walk around, and the best is, the funniest part is when you put on Google Maps distance, it's usually the walking distance that is shorter than the taxi. So it makes sense to stay in the center. So I would say Central Park, near the Grand Central Station, Times Square itself. I think these are my top 3 places to stay. So yes, a lot of people also prefer staying downtown, but that is mostly for business. You can actually even stay there over a weekend. The prices are a little lower if you go in, but be ready to, use the tube or the metro or a taxi, because that's not really a walking distance as such. But yes, my top 3 places would be Times Square, would be Central Park, and Grand Central Station to stay in New York.
Okay, so staying is done, right? Like, okay, now that you've told us that, where to stay, I just go by what I saw on Instagram, right? So
Mhm.
one of the things we saw was you did a helicopter ride in
Yes.
New York. So
Yeah.
often New York's also said that, you know, you can see the city on foot, but like you said, Google Maps shows you directions. Like it's shorter to go like walking than getting a cab, but
Mm.
Ubers are very easily found and
Mm.
lifts are very easily found, right? But what was the helicopter ride like, and what did you get to see?
Neil, it's amazing. It's really amazing. And I like helicopter rides, and I think it gives you a bird's eye view of the city, which is an amazing way to suddenly see the city and point out things that, hey, we did this and we went there and we were there too. So I think it's a nice thing. Some people like to do it first. I kind of like to do it at the end of the tour, so that once I have seen and done places, and then you're watching them from the sky and you can really point things out. So that was really nice. I would recommend that you do it at twilight, because that is really nice. Like, you can go up there, see the sun setting, everything shining. It is stunning. We went in the morning, of course. Again, a point to note here is you have to be careful as to where is the helicopter ride taking off from, because if you're not careful, there were some that were actually even from New Jersey, and that's 45 minutes away from New York. It just shows up online as it is New York, but you have to be careful, because that means that you have to leave at least 1.5 to 2 hours prior, because you have to be at the helicopter, the port, about half an hour before the ride. And it was funny, but there was also an Indian a family who had come in before us. And it's, I don't know about you, but a lot of people generally do not read the fine print. When we book anything, we forget to read the fine print that comes with it. And the same thing happens with a helicopter. I have an obsession of reading down to the last line. And obviously, I had read through everything, but there was a very clear line that said that if you are over, because helicopters go on weight, right? The weight of the people who would go into the helicopter. So if you are over 250 pounds, then you have to buy 2 tickets for a helicopter ride. And very often people don't read that. So there was this family who had come in, and all of them were very tall, like six, Indian family actually, and they were something like 6.5 feet and above. So they were obviously all quite heavy. And there was a big argument going on, because the helicopter company was saying, look, we can't take you in, and all of you have to buy another ticket. So there was some back and forth going on there, but that's one point that everyone should be careful about.
Yeah,
Um,
right. I mean, I'll
yeah,
interrupt you there, but
yeah,
yeah, that makes sense, right? Because
yeah,
it goes on weight, and if those are the rules, then those are the rules. Like
yeah,
you can't like bypass them or
yeah.
anything like that.
And the
So I would
funniest
agree.
part
Yeah,
was the next person who walks in was a Mexican couple. And even they had not read it. And they were all arguing that, look, you didn't tell us about it. And they said, but we were clear in the instructions. So, I mean, they were really quite clear. We just don't read things that we get, is
that's
more
true.
like it. But the helicopter ride was really amazing, because when they go up, the pilot does tell you a little bit. So you have your headphones pretty similar to what we are wearing, because it's noisy. About 5 to 6 people in one helicopter, and they point out the most important sites to you as you go around Manhattan. Again, the timing is important. So sometimes you go in for the lowest price tours, but those are often just for 10 minutes or less than 10 minutes. And that's not worth it. I would say a good time in the helicopter ride has to be at least around 15 minutes. Like 12 to 15-minute ride is a good enough time to go up there and really experience, because of course it's weather dependent. If the weather is not so good, they will bring you back early, but usually it's not a problem. 15-minute ride is a good enough time to go through everything. And it was really nice to see Central Park. For me, the highlight was to see Central Park, because you have this huge park, and the whole size and the scale of it is evident when you go. And then you have all these Manhattan, the tall buildings around it. And the parts of New York become extremely clear when you're up there, like downtown, Central Park, Manhattan, New Jersey. And of course, the highlight was coming towards the end when you fly past the Statue of Liberty. There is nothing that takes that away from you. You just feel so close. And really, I would recommend that if you can, you really want to record or take photos, just keep it on a selfie stick and don't look at the camera. Don't look at your phone, because if you
That
spend
is a
time,
very
it's
valid point.
very
Yeah.
quick. It's so quick that if you're busy taking photos, you missed actually seeing it. So
Yeah.
just put it on a selfie stick or whatever stick or gimbal or whatever you have next to you, and watch where you're going, because it's so beautiful. But in a 15-minute ride, you're probably 1 or 2 minutes near the Statue of Liberty. So don't miss it, guys. Don't miss it.
No, that's
And
what Veena World tour managers also tell
yes.
our guests, right? That you have come to see this place with your eyes, and leave aside the photos for a bit, because photos, yes, they give you memories,
Yeah.
but you don't want to like miss what you're seeing. Like, and that's what they say about, say, New Year fireworks anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're so busy trying to click the photo that the spectacle that,
You miss the
yeah,
moment. You
exactly.
don't want to miss the moment.
Yeah, so, and I quite agree, and I'm glad that you brought this point up, because
Uh,
in a helicopter it's super fast,
yeah.
and that's what I also try to do when I'm on a plane, right? That I'll always take the window seat, because I would want to like look outside, but then I want to see, like, you can see the ceiling if you're flying
Yeah.
out, like,
Yeah.
south of India or something, the
Mm.
plane turns and all of that. So something similar. But yeah, like, interesting. But the helicopter ride, yeah, at twilight would be an
It's
incredible
really nice.
experience, right?
It's
Maybe,
really
yeah,
nice.
like that should be. But how much should one budget for an experience like this? Like, different companies offer it in New York and do
Right.
it. But if you can give us a ballpark figure, that what should be something for a
So
15-minute ride?
typically around the world, it's around $200 to $250, which is the same for New York. And this is kind of similar across the world. Fuel prices, of course, would dictate what happens. The cheaper ones start at something like $150, but again, read the fine print, because usually I've seen that with the cheaper ones, you have to pay a heliport fee of up to $35 to $50, which can be in cash, it's like a handling fee. So, usually it's in cash when you go there. So make sure you have that cash. Of course, nowadays, everywhere the online payments are done. But when there are such extras that you have to give, always make sure that you have the cash for that. So that's something I would say you have to keep in mind. But yeah, you can even get it for $150, and then it can go up to 250, 200. Again, if you're on a weekend, do book in early, because it's going to get full up pretty soon. And not all companies offer everything. And then check where is the departure point, because you have to make sure you're there at least minimum half an hour before you go in. But Neil, you're talking of Twilight, and I think let's talk of the next thing, which actually was in this whole trip one of the major highlights for me, because again, that's something that I really enjoyed doing at sunset, and something I've never done before in New York. And this was sailing in New York Harbor.
Wow,
So
so you've
that
done
was
the
really
air,
amazing.
you've done like by sea or by water, and you've like roamed around New York. So you've done all of it. But okay, tell us about the
Yes.
sailing thing.
So, usually you have the ferries that go to Liberty Island and they come back, right? So we've done that. We've gone into Statue of Liberty previously. So we didn't do it this time, of course. But we really wanted to be on the Hudson River. And I think maybe watching Sully, if you've seen the movie where he actually lands a plane into Hudson River, that was also somewhere in my mind, that I want to be on the river. And we said there are different ways to do it. And while we were checking, there are some cruises that can have 200 to 300 people on board. There were cruises that gave you an option of a dinner cruise on board. For someone who wants to have an extended cruise, I think a dinner cruise is a good option. But with New York, we have so many restaurants to go to, which we'll talk of later. So we said we don't want a dinner cruise, but we want to do a cruise. And then I didn't want to be in a boat with 200 other people. So
Yeah.
that's when we saw this, and I really liked this idea. So it's a schooner, I think that's how you pronounce it, a schooner, which had 3 sails. So it was this beautiful, massive yacht with 3 sails on it, and there were hardly like 20, 25 people. It starts from Chelsea Piers, so we did go there. And from there, we set sail for about 2 hours. We were sailing, and it was an amazing experience, because you start off in daytime, and then you watch the sunset, and the sun was setting just behind the Statue of Liberty. It was a moment I cannot forget. You board on cruise, and they offer you champagne or a wine, or a beer or whatever it is. So one drink is offered with the ride. The other drinks you have to buy if you want to. And there were couples, there were families, there were friends, there were so many other people. And I think After an hour, everyone was just lost in the ride. And when we were coming back, we could see the skyline of Manhattan, and the lights were coming on, and that's an image that you can just come home with. I think you can keep this as the last point on your tour, because you really come back with this beautiful memory of New York, which you can't forget. So sailing was
I
quite
think
special.
I think that's a good way of putting it. Like, you mentioned while about the helicopter ride also that,
Mhm.
try to do it after, like that's what
Mm.
you prefer. Some people prefer looking
The
at it
first also,
the
maybe,
first one, and then
yeah,
you said
yeah,
towards the end.
yeah,
But either way you look at it, at least taking the boat, the cruise, the sailboat at the
yeah,
end of the trip makes sense, because you've taken all of this
yeah,
city in, which is
yeah,
massive, and then you're just
yeah.
like reminiscing all of the good times you've had and all of that. And just going back to that point where you mentioned that you didn't want to be with 200 people on a dinner cruise and all of that.
Yes,
Yes, the dinner cruise can often be limiting, where New York offers so many different restaurants
yes.
that, like, why have dinner on a cruise when you can have another experience like this? So I would quite agree with you. And if,
Mm.
like, when I go to New York next, and if I have to do something like this, an experience on water, I would probably
Yeah.
go for something like this. Now, of course, we spoke about two experiences, which
Mhm.
were the helicopter ride and also the boat. But I remember the last time we were in New York, we were there during Christmas. It was
Yes.
super cold. Like, Christmas
Mm.
gets very cold, and then Jan and Feb it gets freezing. And of course,
Yeah,
Christmas was also freezing.
yeah.
And we were just there staying by Central Park and
Mm.
enjoying it. But how was the weather this time? You went mid-August, right? So
Mhm.
was it
Yes.
cold? Was it rainy? How was it?
So everyone warned us when we were, California is known for its amazing weather. And when we were in California, everyone was warning us that New York's become very muggy, it's very balmy, it's very humid, just like Mumbai and everything. And they were having a heat wave, actually. This time when we went, there was a heat wave all across Europe and the US. And it was pretty warm, Neil. But I don't know, as if magically the day we landed in New York, the weather changed and it was perfect. So it was very nice sunshine. It wasn't too warm. It was just enough to have a light jacket and walk around. And on, I think the second and the third day, we didn't even need a jacket. So it was a very pleasant, like 22, 25 degrees. Sun was shining and it was just beautiful. Just so I would say August is a very good time to go there, like through July and August, because most of the US is on holiday during that time. People are also traveling out of the city. New York, again, it was buzzing. There were a lot of crowd because we did land up on the weekend. But otherwise, it's really a good time to go there. If you don't want to be in the cold and you want to be able to walk everywhere, because walking in New York is something special. And if the weather's right, you can really walk everywhere. So yeah, it was quite nice.
So this connecting my next point. Did you walk everywhere, or did you take Ubers everywhere? Like, how was, because I remember the last time I was there, I was just walking blocks
Mhm.
and blocks and blocks, and it was an easy 20,000 steps every alternate day, 10,000 steps every day. So what did you guys do?
Neil, like I mentioned at the start, we were staying in Times Square. So we were walking everywhere, like everywhere. It's only when we had to go somewhere far off, like say a half an hour ride away, we probably took an Uber. But even then, we would check and say, look, we can. And you get used to it. So I kept checking the step counter, and I think we were doing 15 to 18,000 steps a day. So it's very easy to complete a step count over 10, 15,000 once you're traveling, and especially in New York. So we walked everywhere and we realized the advantage of staying in Times Square. The first day I was wondering, did we do the right thing? Because there's this sudden huge crowd. Like we came in with a taxi, and when we landed, and of course, Times Square hotels have smaller lobbies. The major lobbies usually on the first floor, so you go a level above. And New York is New York, so some of the hotels you do have to maybe sometimes fight your way in a little bit for early check-ins, late checkouts, or
Yeah.
just generally to be able to get a room which is very nice or which is a little quieter. The noise didn't bother me, actually. Maybe the window glazing is really good in all these hotels, so the noise for one was did not bother me. And as we were sightseeing, we were going around doing a lot of things, actually. And every time we came and we said, shall we felt a little like we needed some downtime, maybe, or we had shopping bags in hand, for example, and we said, wish we could keep it somewhere. And then suddenly he looked at the map and I said, but the hotel is right here, we can. So we got into this habit that we would spend, say, the first half of the day walking around, come back to the hotel, drop our bags, or just have a little bit of a tea or a coffee, some downtime, get ready again and hit the town again for the second half of the day. So it was very easy to walk around. And again, location of the hotel really helped that happen. So I enjoyed it because, the next point that we can come to is what to do in New York in the evenings. And for that, Times Square worked perfectly. So anywhere we wanted to go was walking distance. And
Awesome.
again, like I said, shorter than a taxi ride.
Great. So, and I remember seeing photos of you at Times Square. So let's come to that point then. Like, what should we do in the evening in New York? And of course, people will have differing opinions because everyone, whenever you're going to New York, people will be like, oh, take my list, take my list, take my list of bars, take my list of restaurants, take my list of like shows, art museums, or whatever. But what's your list like? Like, what would you say should be done in the evening in New York?
So I love musicals. And so number one on my point was to catch at least one musical. And we debated a lot as to what shall we see, because there is a huge choice. And again, entire Broadway is in and around Times Square. So all those lanes there, you just have to cross a block and you have different things. So we were walking past, and just walking past that, even if you don't go in, is so much fun because you see the Harry Potter musical sign, then you see the MJ sign. So there was Tina Turner, Michael Jackson, so many different shows that were going on. Of course, I think the eternal favorite for everybody is The Lion King, but I think I watched it 3 times already. So we said not one more time. But we did go in and see Aladdin, and I didn't feel like, I thought I wanted a spectacle. Like I wanted something that would light up the screen and, the stage, sorry, not the screen, the stage, and something that would really be interesting. So with a few of them, you really have to pay attention. Like I've seen the Mormon Book of Mormon. And for that,
Hamilton is on my list. Like, I really want to go see Hamilton. Heta and I have been, like, it's on our bucket list. Like at some point, we'll probably go watch it.
Definitely. But Neil, if you want to go and see the Hamilton, book Hamilton first and then book your hotels, because Hamilton is super popular even today. And the rates are just insane. So the pricing for Hamilton is still at the top, still. So,
but like, okay, like for someone who's listening to like our episode today and has not seen a musical ever in their lives, okay, one, how much can it cost? How much is, like, how much should we pay for it? Like, something can cost exorbitant and, then there's no value for money. And when I'm going for a musical, is there a dress code? Like all of these things come to mind.
Neil, good points, and definitely worth keeping in mind. You can start off, musicals need not be really expensive. So it depends on what you want from that. A musical is a stage show, right? So it's like watching what we say theater. In India also we have, in Maharashtra, we have some really good theater performances. So with theater, everything's live. So each performance can be a little different from the earlier one. Though typically, of course, it's the same story, same cast, same props and everything going on, but everything is live and it's really quite exciting. I would say that I like to see it from the front, though I don't like the first row, because with the first row, usually the stage is a little higher and then you get a neck ache just watching everything. So I like the second, third, or the fourth row typically. But of course, those are the more expensive ones. You do have options for balcony and other things. So if you don't want to pay it much, like say around even something like a $30-40 price, and again, it depends on how early you book. The earlier you book, the prices are of course lower because the more seats are available. So as soon as you know you want to see a musical and you've done your air ticket booking, go ahead and book your musical tickets, and you can see the map on screen, and even Veena can do it for you. So we can have a look and we can suggest the best seats accordingly. Usually, like, of course, tall people like to sit by the aisle so that they can get in and out, or just have some leg space, because most of these theaters are not very modern. They are old. They have a lot of charm about them, but then they are also kind of slightly old. So the leg space isn't that great. But the lower price tickets are for the balconies behind or the stalls. And then as you go closer to the theater, you end up paying more. So you can pay, say, around $150 as well. So the range is from a $40 to around a $200 also. So it depends. Like if you're booking a show for today, obviously you're paying more. But there are different sites that can offer you cheaper tickets, like Ticketmaster and so many other sites which offer you cheaper tickets. One thing on my bucket list is actually, like how they show in the movies and the opera, especially, you have those decorative balconies that come out from the sides, and there are only two people seated. So you can get the whole balcony to yourself. So that's something I want to try. Only I don't know how it might be to look down at a performance from the height. That might be
Yeah, it
something different.
depends. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes it may be great, sometimes it may
Yeah.
not be great. But, here I'd like to bring out another point that, some shows have free seating.
Yeah.
And I'm not a huge fan of that, because then you have to go in early in spite of paying
Yeah.
such a high amount. So, like, most musicals will still have assigned seating, right? Like that
Yes, yes,
yeah. So
because you're
that's
paying for a certain price for the seat. So usually Broadway musicals have assigned seating, but yes, there are a lot of shows in New York, like you mentioned. And if you remember, we did see the Blue Man Group as well. And that can be different for different people. So you don't know what to expect. And it can be quite interactive. So you can have things falling on your head, or sometimes in a musical, especially like Lion King and Mary Poppins, you actually have the characters come in from, behind you through the aisles. So the kids really love it. So yes, there are different ways to watch that.
well,
But dress code, you
yeah.
mentioned the dress code. It's no longer really, once upon a time, it was a little understood that you would be very formally dressed for a musical. I think that still holds true for opera, but not so much for theater anymore. You could be sightseeing, so you can, and anyways, the US is quite easy on dressing. They're very casual. So your sneakers, t-shirts, nice top, and you're good.
Yeah, but don't go in shorts, right? Like,
Yeah,
I often
avoid
see
that.
like
Avoid that.
that shorts, or like, just track pants, try to avoid.
Also, I think it's for yourself. You want to have a great time. You want to have a good evening. So why not dress up a little and enjoy?
Yeah.
Because usually another point with theater is there is either a dinner pre or post that you would want to. And a lot of the restaurants around the Broadway will offer a pre-dinner package or a post-dinner package. So you can choose either.
Great. So, Sunila, now let's come to the food, because food is something that, like New York is famous for. So let's stick to like what you had, how your experience was, because I often would look at it that, okay, every meal I'll try a new cuisine and then, see how it goes. But how was your experience?
Very similar, Neil. And what happened was in California, when we were with Raj, we were having every different type of Asian food every day. So there was no choice because he really loves that. And we had gone for him. So there was Vietnamese on one day, Korean on the other, but it was all within the Asian food. So when we came to New York, we said, let's try completely different cuisines. And as luck would have it, it was New York Restaurant Week. So that made things very interesting and very nice, because there was certain fixed pricing, like a $45 lunch and a $60 dinner. And they had a curated menu. So there are a lot of restaurants who were part of it, and you could just choose a restaurant, book it. And, one point is, if you're in US anyways, apps like Yelp or Open Table really help. So you can check that, and you can just book the restaurant there. In case you're canceling, I think it's nice to just call them and say that you're canceling, because that kind of keeps your rating on Open Table and other things also going well. So that's something to keep in mind.
Very, very valid point.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to book it. And for the restaurant, it's lost income, right? Like they could have taken two others, like people who were wanting a reservation. So yeah, like ratings are very important now.
So our first meal was a Peruvian restaurant. The second one was a Cuban restaurant. The third was an Italian. And I think the fourth meal we had was Greek. So we did taste many different things. The Cuban restaurant was actually quite interesting. And it was a little taste of Cuba inside. A nice music, and there was dance and open air atrium, and really quite lovely. New York also has a lot of restaurants with a view. And in fact, one brunch I had, and I did meet New York Tourism out there, had a lunch with them, and that was just close to Central Park. So there is a cafe called the Bluebird London Cafe, and you have this amazing view of Central Park from there, like just at the one south end of Central Park at Columbus Circle. And you can, it was really nice, very nice to go up there. And on the topic of restaurants, I think good thing for younger people also to follow it up with other rooftop bars of New York that are really famous. So you can even go bar hopping. You have tickets that you can buy. Even Veena can make that happen for you. So we can give you different tickets that give you access or early access, because otherwise you'd be waiting in long queues everywhere. So rooftop bars are another thing that you should definitely not miss in New York.
Yeah, and another thing I'd like to point out is that New York, San Francisco, LA, London are some cities in the world where you get produced not only for one particular cuisine, but like everything. Like I was once having a Japanese meal and the chef told me that, Neil, the fish that comes in here is like flying in from Japan every day.
Wow.
And that is why, like, we will have the freshest produce. And that's why you'll often see restaurants in New York ranking high on like the top 10, top 50s list and all of that, just because many chefs have migrated to the US and they have started restaurants in the Big Apple. And that I would say really gives New York its charm.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, rooftops. Oh, like, if you ask my wife Heta about rooftops, she has a massive list. And then, on one of the episodes of 5 Minute Travel Tips, we'll probably cover some of the bars and food that is there. But anything in particular that, like, I wanted to ask you that, how does tipping work in New York, or how does tipping work in the US?
Good point.
And an episode on the US or any city of the US cannot be complete without talking about tipping, because in India we have the service charge and we also have a culture of tipping if you really like the service and all of that. But in the US, they live on the tips that they get, like people who are working at a restaurant or a bar. So how does it work? How was your experience this time? Did anyone chase you down saying that, okay, like, you haven't tipped me enough or anything like that? What was your experience like on that?
No, we were careful enough to tip properly and not have people chasing us. But very good point, Neil, because all across the US, tipping is, I would say, a custom, and it's kind of mandatory because it is a part of their income. I think their salary structure is such that a lot depends on that. And usually I found the servers really amazing that you wanted to give them a tip as well. In fact, we went to this Lebanese restaurant. I remember you giving me a list of restaurants about 4-5 years back. And I wanted to go back to one particular one, Ilili, which is on Fifth Avenue. And he was so amazing that he would come up to us, and he was not just would give good suggestions, but was also quite entertaining. And he said, no, look, this is really fresh and you would love it. And don't go in for this particular dish, but trust me and take this. And he kept coming back to check on us. He kept coming. He was giving really good suggestions, really looking after us. So it came very naturally and from the heart to be able to give that tip. Typical tipping is at least around 15% is what is expected. Of course, if you've not had a good experience, you can tip lesser, but what is a general norm is around 15%. And what I found really interesting is that every time that you're paying the bill, to make it easier for you, the bill comes to you with 3 different tipping amounts. So, what a 15% would be, what an 18% tip would be, and what a 22% tip would be. So they've actually pre-calculated it for you.
So
and
their
you just
lower
have to
bar is
choose.
15%. So
Yes, at least.
So listeners, like,
much.
you should probably budget also according to the tipping also, because generally you'll be like, okay, I want to spend $30 on a meal, but think about the tip also that you're going to put at the end of it, because that is a big part of their culture. So did you ever tip 25%, or was it generally in the 15 to 18% bracket?
More like the 18%. 15 to 18 is what we would say. Like one place we were a little annoyed because they kind of made us tip even before the service was given. So we said, okay, I don't think they really deserve a tip out here. But most of the other places, I think we were somewhere around 15 and 18%. So 18% is generally what we would go with if you're happy. And if you're like really happy and ecstatic, then 22 to 25% is also a tip that is given. But,
Awesome. So, of course, Sunila, we've spoken for 35 minutes, I think now, about just the Big Apple. And still more can be spoken about. But as we get to the end of the episode, what would you like to, any missing points or anything that you have on
We
your
can
mind?
go on for hours about New York and still not have spoken enough. Of course, there is the Thanksgiving parade that is coming up, the New York New Year's Eve, like NYE ball drop and at Times Square is something that people can look forward to. And at Veena World, we are giving different packages so that you don't have to stand in queues to see all of this. Of course, that would be a very luxurious VIP package for you to offer. But I think I want to talk about towards the end of the episode, I want to talk about how New York is always changing and there's always something to see. So I think I was in New York last about 3 or 4 years back. And at that point, something that was new was what is known as the vessel at Hudson Yards. And it's this amazing architectural piece where you have a lot of steps to climb and you keep climbing it all the way to the top. And I thought, okay, that's something new that I've done and maybe there's nothing else this time. So this time around, the vessel has been now, the entry to the vessel is closed. You can still go to Hudson Yards and see it. But at Hudson Yards, they have this amazing park called the High Line Park. So the High Line Park is used to be a railway track earlier, and this was not in use, and it was like an ugly point in the New York landscape. And the city has converted it to beautiful park with trees and plants, and people are actually going up there for a walk now. So they've converted the city into something very beautiful. So I enjoy that about New York, that every time you're going back there, there's something new. So I loved walking on the High Line Park, and it's a really nice touristic circuit now. So they're developing this newer area more towards downtown. So you have the Edge, which is a new observation deck. New York already had the top of the rock at the Rockefeller Empire State Building. You could go up there. But now there is the Edge and there is also the Summit One Vanderbilt, two new observation decks. So from the Edge, you walk a little ahead and the High Line Park starts. So you climb up the steps and you're walking on these, you can see the tracks and you can see the trees. And then you end up near Hudson Yards and the vessel. So this entire area is new. Once you get off there is Chelsea Piers. And Chelsea Piers is again where they built it so beautifully that you could walk by the Hudson River for as long as you want. And you reach, so I actually noticed this place from the helicopter ride and from the, sailing. And I said, now I need to come back again, because they had this little thing called the Little Island. And that was like small pillars on which they're trying to get New Yorkers out of New York, but within New York into nature. And it has parks, it has art installations, just simply stunning. So if you look up Little Island on New York, you'll see how pretty it is. Again, that has an observation deck. So there's always something new and something different coming up in New York. And, we call it the concrete jungle, but there really is a lot of greenery in New York. And one visit to Central Park and try and, see all of it in one visit, it's not possible. And when we went in, they were shooting Law and Order out there. So it was fun to watch a little bit of real life movies and, whatever television series happening in New York. So New York is always buzzing. There's something to do all the time.
Awesome. So let's end on that note. Listeners and viewers, thank you so much for tuning in to Travel, Explore, Celebrate Life. This was the Big Apple, the city that never sleeps, and a place that you can keep visiting all the time. This was New York. Thank you for listening. We will see you next week.